The conference room fell silent the moment she spoke. Lieutenant Colonel Vanessa O'Yelleran stood at the head of the table, her voice cutting through the condescension that had filled the room for the past 40 minutes. "Ask your general who I am," she said. The words hung in the air like smoke from a detonation. Colonel Marcus Whitford, who had spent the entire briefing dismissing her training program proposal with barely concealed contempt, actually laughed. He turned to the other officers, as if inviting them to share in the joke. "Is it supposed to intimidate us?" he asked. "Some mysterious past we should all be trembling about? Before we continue, drop a comment and let us know what state you are watching from. Maybe you have known someone whose true capabilities remained hidden from the world around them." Vanessa did not flinch. She kept her eyes fixed on Major General Theodore Harrington, who sat at the opposite end of the table. The commanding general had not moved since she spoke. His coffee cup remained suspended halfway to his lips, and something in his expression had shifted from polite attention to absolute stillness. 2 words, Vanessa said. "Black Talon." The coffee cup came down hard enough to slosh liquid onto the polished wood. Harrington was on his feet before anyone could process the change. "Everyone out," he commanded. His voice carried the weight of 30 years of authority. "Now, this meeting is concluded." Whitford sputtered in protest. "Sir, we have not finished reviewing the proposal, and I have serious concerns about Colonel O'Yelleran's qualifications to lead this initiative." His words died in his throat as Harrington turned to face him. The look in the general's eyes was something none of them had ever seen before. It was not anger. It was something closer to fear. "I set out," Harrington repeated. "Every officer in this room will forget the last 2 minutes of this conversation. That is not a request." The scramble for the door was undignified but swift. Whitford lingered, his face red with confusion and wounded pride, but a junior aide practically dragged him through the doorway. Within 30 seconds, only Vanessa and Harrington remained in the room. The general waited until the door clicked shut before he spoke. "Have you lost your mind?" he asked. His voice was barely above a whisper, as though the walls themselves might be listening. "That name does not exist. That program never happened. You know what invoking it could mean for you." Vanessa finally allowed herself to exhale. She had known this moment would come eventually. She had just expected it to arrive under different circumstances. "I know exactly what it means, sir. I also know that I have spent the last 3 years watching officers like Whitford dismiss everything I bring to the table because they see a woman with an administrative service record. They have no idea what I have done or what I am capable of." Harrington ran a hand over his face. The gesture made him look older than his 58 years. "That is the point, Vanessa. That is exactly the point. The people who serve in that program gave up the right to recognition. You knew that when you signed on. We all did." Vanessa moved to the window, looking out over the training fields of Fort Bragg. Somewhere out there, young soldiers were learning skills they might never use. Others were preparing for deployments that would change them forever. Some would not come home at all. "I'm not asking for a parade," she said quietly. "I'm asking to be allowed to do my job without being undermined by men who have never operated at my level." The general joined her at the window. For a long moment, neither spoke. When Harrington finally broke the silence, his voice had softened. "You know, I cannot verify anything officially. If Whitford files a complaint, if he demands an investigation into your claims, I will not be able to protect you without exposing the entire program. I understand. Do you?" Harrington turned to face her directly. "Because what you said in that room just painted a target on your back. Whitford comes from a powerful military family. His uncle runs one of the largest defense contractors in the country. If he decides to dig into your record, he has resources most people cannot imagine." Vanessa met his gaze without wavering. "Then let him dig. He will not find anything that is not supposed to be found. And if he digs too deep into things that are supposed to stay buried, that becomes his problem, not mine." Harrington studied her for a long moment, and something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. "You always were the most stubborn operator I ever worked with," he said. "Just promise me you will be careful. Whatever is in those sealed files, it needs to stay sealed. For your sake, and for the sake of everyone who served alongside you." Later that evening, Vanessa walked through the motor pool on her way back to her quarters. The setting sun cast long shadows across the concrete, and most of the day's shift had already headed home. She was lost in thought when she heard the sound of laughter coming from behind a row of vehicles. 3 specialists stood in a loose circle around a young private who was struggling under the weight of an oversized equipment bag. The soldiers were not helping. They were watching her stumble with expressions that ranged from amusement to open contempt. Vanessa changed direction without thinking. As she approached, she could hear their comments more clearly. The biggest of the 3, a specialist with a name tape reading Corbin, was doing most of the talking. "Come on, Private," he sneered. "You wanted to be in the army so bad. This is what it looks like. Better get used to carrying your own weight." The private, barely out of basic training by the look of her, tried to shift the bag higher on her shoulder. It slipped, and she nearly went down. The laughter grew louder. "Specialist Corbin." Vanessa's voice cut through the noise like a blade. The 3 soldiers snapped to attention so fast it was almost comical. They had not noticed the silver oak leaves on her collar until she was right in front of them. "Mom, Corbin stammered. We were just leaving," Vanessa finished for him. "All 3 of you." Now, they scattered without another word, leaving the young private standing alone with her burden. Vanessa reached down and lifted one end of the equipment bag, taking half the weight onto her own shoulder. The private stared at her with wide eyes. "Ma'am, you do not have to," she started. "Where are you headed?" Vanessa asked simply. "Building 7, ma'am. Supply turn in." Vanessa nodded and started walking, matching her pace to the younger woman's shorter stride. They covered the distance in comfortable silence. When they reached the supply building, Vanessa set down her end of the bag and turned to leave. "Ma'am," the private called after her. "Thank you. You did not have to do that." Vanessa paused, but did not turn around. "Take care of yourself, Private. And remember that the people who try to make you feel small usually do it because they are afraid of how big you might become." She walked away before the young woman could respond, disappearing into the gathering dusk. Command Sergeant Major Darnell Vickers found her an hour later, sitting alone in the corner of the NCO club with an untouched glass of water in front of her. The old Sergeant Major had the kind of face that had seen everything and the kind of discretion that kept him from talking about most of it. He slid into the seat across from her without asking permission. "Heard there was some excitement in the command brief today," he said. His voice was gravelly from decades of shouting over gunfire and diesel engines. "Word is he said something that made the general clear the room faster than a fire drill." Vanessa took a sip of her water. "Word travels fast. It does when a full bird colonel comes storming out of a meeting looking like someone told him Santa Claus is not real." Vickers leaned back in his chair, studying her with eyes that missed nothing. "I have known you for 2 years now, Colonel. You are not the type to make waves without a reason. So what happened in there?" She considered her answer carefully. "I reminded them that not everything is in my official record." Vickers nodded slowly. "I figure it was something like that." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "I do not know what Black Talon is. Never heard the name before today. But I saw General Harrington's face when he came out of that room, and I have known that man for 15 years. He looked spooked in a way I have never seen before. Whatever you did, wherever you served, it scared the hell out of a man who does not scare easy." Vanessa said nothing. She did not have to. The sergeant major stood up to leave, then paused. "Just watch your back, ma'am. Colonel Whitford is not the type to let something like this go. He has friends in high places and a family name that opens doors most of us do not even know exist. If you made an enemy of him today, he will be looking for ways to hurt you." "I know," Vanessa said quietly. "I'm counting on it." The gym was empty at 0500, exactly the way Vanessa preferred it. She moved through her routine in the pre-dawn silence, her body flowing from one exercise to the next with a precision that had nothing to do with fitness trends or personal training videos. These movements had been drilled into her in places that did not appear on any map by instructors whose names she had never known. She was halfway through a complex mobility sequence when the door opened. A captain she recognized from the intelligence section walked in, gym bag over his shoulder, and stopped short when he saw her. He nodded politely and moved to the free weights, but Vanessa caught him watching her in the mirror. His eyes tracked the way she transitioned between positions, the economy of motion that came from years of needing to be ready for anything at any moment. She deliberately fumbled her next movement, introducing a slight awkwardness that had not been there before. Just a desk officer trying to stay in shape. Nothing to see. The captain lost interest and focused on his own workout. Vanessa finished her routine and slipped out before the morning rush arrived. Across post, Colonel Marcus Whitford sat in his office reviewing personnel files. The sun had barely risen, but he had been at his desk for over an hour. Colonel Patricia Sung occupied the chair across from him, a cup of coffee cooling in her hands. The promotion board meets in 6 weeks, Whitford said without looking up from the documents spread before him. General Harrington has been pushing O'Yellerin's name for the past year. If her training program gets approved, it strengthens her case considerably. Sung shifted in her seat. She's qualified on paper. Her efficiency reports are solid. Her assignments have been varied. The board will see a well-rounded officer. Whitford finally raised his eyes. On paper, he repeated, that is exactly the problem. Everything about her is on paper. Have you ever met anyone who actually served with her in a combat zone? Anyone who can verify what she supposedly did during her deployments? She has commendations from her commanding officers. Commendations are easy to arrange when you know the right people. Whitford leaned back in his chair, his jaw tight. My family has served this country for 4 generations. My grandfather landed at Normandy. My father commanded a regiment in Vietnam. I have led soldiers in combat on 3 continents. And I am supposed to compete for promotion against someone whose greatest accomplishment is pushing paper in air-conditioned offices? Sung said nothing. She had heard variations of this speech before, and she had learned that Whitford did not appreciate interruption when he was building momentum. The Army has standards for a reason, Whitford continued. Physical standards, leadership standards, standards that exist because lives depend on them. When we lower those standards, when we promote people based on politics rather than proven capability, soldiers die. His voice hardened. I'm not going to let that happen on my watch. What are you proposing? Sung asked carefully. Whitford smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I have already spoken with the training command. There will be a practical skills assessment for all officers involved in the program redesign. Combat fitness, tactical decision-making, weapons qualification. Let her prove she belongs in the same room as officers who have actually done the job. Captain Amara Okonkwo found Vanessa in her office later that morning, surrounded by stacks of training curriculum documents. The younger officer knocked on the open door frame, her expression troubled. Ma'am, do you have a minute? Vanessa gestured to the chair across from her desk. What is on your mind, Captain? Amara sat down, her posture rigid with barely contained frustration. I just came from a meeting with Colonel Whitford's staff. They are restructuring the timeline for the training program proposal. Again, every time we make progress, they find a new reason to delay. Vanessa set down her pen. Tell me exactly what happened. The younger woman's words came faster now, anger bleeding through her professional composure. They want additional environmental impact studies. Environmental impact studies for a training program that uses existing facilities. It is absurd. And when I pushed back, Major Hendricks told me that perhaps I should focus on my own career development rather than attaching myself to initiatives that lack institutional support. Vanessa listened without interrupting. When Amara finished, she was quiet for a moment before speaking. Did you document the conversation? I wrote down everything as soon as I left the room. Good. Vanessa leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. Every slight, every dismissal, every time you were talked over or condescended to, document it. Names, dates, exact words when you can remember them. Build your case. Amara's frustration shifted to confusion. Build my case for what? For whatever comes next. Vanessa met the younger woman's eyes. The Army is changing, Captain. Slowly, painfully, but it is changing. The officers who resist that change will use every tool at their disposal to maintain the status quo. Your job is to outlast them, to be so competent, so thoroughly documented, so impossible to dismiss that they have no choice but to acknowledge your value. Something in Amara's expression softened. Is that what you did? Vanessa allowed herself a small smile. I'm still doing it. Every single day. The moment of connection between them was interrupted by a knock at the door. A specialist from the admin section stood in the hallway, looking uncomfortable. Ma'am, I have a message from the personnel office. Colonel Whitford has submitted a request to have you reassigned pending review of the training program proposal. He is citing concerns about officer qualifications and program oversight. Amara's face went pale. He cannot do that. Can he? Vanessa kept her expression neutral, though something cold settled in her stomach. Thank you, specialist. That will be all. When they were alone again, Amara started to speak, but Vanessa held up a hand. Not here. We will discuss this later. For now, I need you to continue working on the curriculum documents as if nothing has changed. Can you do that? The captain nodded, though her eyes were bright with anger. Yes, ma'am. After Amara left, Vanessa sat alone in the silence of her office. The afternoon light was fading, casting long shadows across the walls. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a photograph she kept hidden beneath stacks of routine paperwork. 5 soldiers in unmarked tactical gear stared back at her from the image. No unit patches, no name tapes, no identifying features of any kind. Just 5 faces she would never forget, 3 of them now crossed out with careful black marker. Rodriguez, Chun, Becky, gone in a single night in a city whose name would never appear in any official report. She traced her finger across their faces, then closed the drawer quickly when she heard footsteps in the hallway. The shooting range was nearly empty when Vanessa arrived that evening. She had hoped to clear her head with an hour of target practice, but she was not alone for long. A figure appeared at the station beside her, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who had spent years learning to pass unnoticed. Sergeant First Class Ramon Delacroix did not look at her as he loaded his weapon. They had not spoken directly since he arrived at Fort Bragg 6 months ago. There had been no need. They both understood the rules of their shared silence. But today he broke that silence. They are asking questions about Mosul, he said, his voice pitched low enough that it would not carry beyond their 2 stations. Someone with Pentagon access pulled the sealed files last week. Vanessa's hands continued their practiced motions, loading rounds into her magazine with mechanical precision. Her face betrayed nothing. Do we know who? Delacroix shook his head slightly. The request was routed through 3 different offices before it hit the archive. Someone wanted to hide their tracks. Vanessa raised her weapon and sighted downrange. The target blurred and refocused as she controlled her breathing. Whoever it was, she said quietly, they just made a very serious mistake. The training exercise was already underway when Vanessa arrived at the observation platform. A company of infantry soldiers moved through the urban warfare simulation course below, clearing buildings and engaging pop-up targets with varying degrees of success. A cluster of senior officers watched from above, clipboards in hand, making notes on unit performance. Colonel Whitford stood at the center of the group, his voice carrying across the platform as he offered commentary on the exercise. Vanessa found a position at the edge of the observers, content to watch in silence. The lead squad reached a 4-way intersection and paused, their team leader scanning the buildings ahead. After a brief consultation, they pushed forward along the main avenue, weapons trained on the upper windows. Vanessa saw the problem immediately. She said nothing. 30 seconds later, simulated enemy fire erupted from a building they had failed to clear on their left flank. The squad scrambled for cover, their formation collapsing as they tried to respond to the unexpected threat. The exercise controllers called a halt, marking 3 soldiers as simulated casualties. Whitford shook his head with theatrical disappointment. Failure to maintain situational awareness, he announced to the assembled officers. Classic mistake. They got tunnel vision on the objective ahead and ignored their flanks. Vanessa remained silent, but something in her posture must have drawn attention. Major Hendricks, one of Whitford's staff officers, turned toward her with a slight smirk. Something to add, Colonel O'Yelleran? Perhaps some insight from your extensive experience in training program administration? Several officers chuckled. Whitford did not bother hiding his amusement. Vanessa considered letting it pass. That would have been a smart move, the political move. Instead, she stepped forward. The flank was not the primary failure point, she said. Her voice was calm, almost detached. Watch the replay. The team leader hesitated at the intersection for nearly 4 seconds before making a decision. In an actual combat environment, that hesitation would have been the death sentence, not the flanking fire. The laughter died. Whitford's expression hardened. That is an interesting theory, Colonel. Perhaps you would like to explain the tactical basis for that assessment? Vanessa met his gaze without flinching. The enemy position on the left was a secondary ambush site. If you watch the target activation sequence, it was triggered by the squad's forward movement, not by their failure to clear the building. The scenario was designed so that the flanking fire would engage regardless of the squad's actions. The purpose was to test their reaction time and adaptability under unexpected contact. She paused. The real test was whether the team leader could make a decision fast enough to get his people into cover before the ambush was fully established. He could not. That 4-second hesitation cost him 3 soldiers. Silence hung over the platform. One of the exercise controllers checked his tablet, then looked up with surprise on his face. "She's right, sir." The left side ambush was on a timed trigger linked to the squad's position at the intersection. It was going to fire no matter what they did. Whitford's face had gone rigid. He turned away from Vanessa without acknowledging her analysis. Let us continue with the next phase of the exercise. The small victory felt hollow as Vanessa watched the officers return their attention to the course below. She had made her point, but she had also deepened the target on her back. That evening, Vanessa placed a secure call to a number she had not dialed in over 2 years. The voice that answered was cautious, stripped of identifying characteristics. "I need information," Vanessa said. "Someone accessed sealed archives related to Mosul last week. I need to know who and why." The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. "You know, I cannot help you with that. Those files are compartmentalized above my access level. Above almost everyone's access level. I am not asking you to access them. I'm asking you to find out who did." Another pause. "Why does it matter? The operation was clean. There is nothing in those files that could compromise you unless someone already knows what they are looking for." Vanessa gripped the phone tighter. "That is exactly what worries me." The connection ended without a goodbye. She had not expected anything different. Command Sergeant Major Vickers found her in the motor pool the next morning, inspecting vehicles for an upcoming training rotation. He waited until they were alone between rows of Humvees before he spoke. "Heard about your performance at the observation platform yesterday," he said. "Word is you made Colonel Whitford look like a first-year cadet in front of half the training command." Vanessa continued her inspection without looking up. "I simply provided an accurate assessment of the tactical situation." Vickers chuckled, a low rumble in his chest. "Sure you did. And I'm sure it was just a coincidence that your accurate assessment happened to contradict everything Whitford had just said." He leaned against the nearest vehicle, crossing his arms. "You know, he's not going to let that slide." "I know. The skills assessment is scheduled for next week." Vickers lowered his voice. "I have seen the course they are setting up. It is weighted heavily toward events that favor officers with recent combat deployments. Weapons qualification under stress, tactical decision making under time pressure, physical fitness standards that push the upper limits of regulation." Vanessa finally looked up from her clipboard. "You think it is designed to make me fail? I think it is designed to make you look bad in front of people who matter." Vickers met her eyes. "I can lose the paperwork. Delay the assessment until after the promotion board meets. Buy you some time." Vanessa shook her head. "No. If I avoid it, Whitford will use that against me just as effectively." She straightened up, her jaw set with determination. "I will take the assessment, and I will pass it." Vickers studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You know, Colonel, most officers in your position would be looking for a way out. A quiet transfer, maybe an early retirement with full benefits. Why are you fighting this so hard?" Vanessa was quiet for a moment before answering. Because there are people coming after me who have spent their entire careers being told they do not belong. Women, minorities, anyone who does not fit the traditional mold. If I back down now, if I let men like Whitford push me out, what message does that send to them? Vickers nodded again, something like respect in his weathered features. Fair enough, ma'am. Just remember that you do not have to fight alone. Some of us old soldiers still believe in doing the right thing, even when it is not the easy thing. The summons to General Harrington's office came that afternoon, delivered by a nervous-looking aide who refused to make eye contact. Vanessa found the general standing at his window, his back to the door, when she entered. "Close the door," Harrington said without turning around. His voice was heavier than she had ever heard it. Vanessa complied and stood at attention, waiting. "I have been making inquiries," Harrington continued, quietly, through channels that are not supposed to exist anymore. He finally turned to face her, and she saw something in his expression that made her stomach tighten. "The request for your sealed files did not come from Washington. It did not come from any of the usual oversight committees or inspector general offices." "Where did it come from?" Vanessa asked, though part of her already suspected the answer. Harrington's face was grim. "Here, Fort Bragg. Someone on this installation used classified access credentials to pull files that are supposed to be buried so deep that God himself could not find them." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "Whoever is coming after you, Vanessa, they're not just trying to derail your career. They are inside the building, and they already know exactly where to look." Colonel Marcus Whitford sat in the study of his family's Virginia estate, surrounded by photographs spanning 4 generations of military service. His father, retired Lieutenant General Harrison Whitford, occupied the leather chair across from him, a glass of bourbon in his weathered hand. "You let her embarrass you," the elder Whitford said. His voice carried the same commanding tone that had once directed divisions in combat. "In front of your peers. In front of officers who will remember that moment when promotion boards convene." Marcus gripped his own glass tighter. She got lucky. The exercise controller backed her interpretation of the scenario. "It will not happen again." His father leaned forward, eyes sharp despite his 73 years. "This is not about one training exercise, Marcus. This woman is a threat to everything our family has built. Do you understand what is at stake here?" Marcus hesitated. "The defense contracts. Whitford Industries." The old general nodded slowly. "Your uncle's company lost a $300 million equipment contract 4 years ago. The official reason was performance failures during field testing. But the real reason was a classified operation that exposed those failures in the worst possible way. An operation that was never supposed to be documented." "Black Talon," Marcus said quietly. His father's expression hardened. "That name does not leave this room. Ever. What matters is that Vanessa O'Yelleran was part of that operation. She was there when our equipment failed. She saw what happened. And now she is stationed at the same installation where you are competing for promotion." He took a long drink of bourbon. "That is not coincidence. Someone placed her there deliberately." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. "You think she is targeting our family?" "I think she represents a loose end that should have been tied off years ago." The general set down his glass. "Your uncle has resources. People who can dig into records that are supposed to stay buried. Use them. Find out exactly what she knows and what she might be willing to share." And Marcus, his voice dropped lower. "If she cannot be managed through proper channels, there are other options." The weight of his father's words settled over Marcus like a shroud. He had always known his family operated by different rules than most. He had simply never been asked to enforce those rules himself. "I understand," he said finally. "I will handle it." Back at Fort Bragg, Captain Amara Okonkwo walked through the headquarters building with her mind churning. The meeting she had just left still felt unreal, like something from a fever dream. Colonel Whitford had requested her presence in his office that morning. She had expected another bureaucratic obstacle, another delay tactic for the training program. Instead, he had offered her something else entirely. "You have a promising career ahead of you, Captain," he had said, his voice smooth and reasonable. "But you are making a strategic error by aligning yourself so closely with Colonel O'Yellerin. Her program will not survive the review process. Her promotion prospects are deteriorating rapidly. When she falls, and she will fall, anyone standing too close will be caught in the debris. Amara had said nothing, waiting for the point. Whitford had smiled. I could use an officer with your capabilities on my staff. The work would be challenging, the visibility excellent. And when the time comes for your own advancement, you would have the full support of officers who know how to navigate the system successfully. The implication had been clear. Abandon Vanessa. Join the winning side. Amara found Vanessa in her office an hour later and told her everything. Vanessa listened without interruption, her face unreadable. When Amara finished, the silence stretched between them. Why did you tell me this? Vanessa asked finally. You could have taken his offer. It would have been the smart career move. Amara straightened in her chair. Because I did not join the army to make smart career moves. I joined to serve with people I respect. And everything I have seen from you in the past 6 months tells me you are worth following, even when following is hard. Something softened in Vanessa's expression. She should have told Amara to reconsider, to protect herself. Instead, she found herself saying something else. Whitford offered you a choice between loyalty and advancement. Those choices define who we become. She paused. You chose well, Captain, but I need you to understand that this is going to get worse before it gets better. Are you prepared for that? Amara nodded. I am. That evening, Vanessa met Delacroix at a quiet corner of the post cemetery. They stood before a row of unmarked graves, stones that bore no names, no dates, no unit designations. Just smooth granite markers for soldiers who had officially never existed. If those files become public, Delacroix said quietly, even in a distorted form, it will not just end your career. The families of the people buried here believe their loved ones died in training accidents, helicopter crashes, equipment malfunctions. They made their peace with that version of events. Vanessa stared at the markers, each one representing a face she still saw in her dreams. I know. Rodriguez's mother still sends flowers to the location they gave her. A fake grave in Arlington, empty except for the lies we told her. Delacroix's voice was tight. If someone exposes the truth, if the real circumstances come out, those families lose everything. The closure they found, the pride they take in their children's service. All of it becomes a lie. Vanessa closed her eyes. I will not let that happen. Delacroix turned to face her. How are you going to stop it? Whoever is digging into those files has access we cannot match. Resources we cannot fight. You are one officer against an enemy you cannot even identify. I know who the enemy is, Vanessa said quietly. I just cannot prove it yet. The parking lot was dark when Vanessa returned to her vehicle that night. The overhead lights that normally illuminated this section had been disabled, leaving only the distant glow of the headquarters building to guide her steps. She saw the damage before she reached her car. Long scratches ran the length of both doors, deep enough to cut through the paint to bare metal. But it was the message carved into the hood that stopped her cold. 2 words, gouged into the surface with deliberate precision. Go home. Vanessa stood motionless, her eyes scanning the shadows around her. The threat was not subtle. It was not meant to be. Someone wanted her to know that they could reach her whenever they chose. That nowhere on this installation was safe. She pulled out her phone and photographed the damage from multiple angles, her hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her body. Then she made a single call. Sergeant Major Vickers answered on the second ring. I need you to meet me in the east parking lot, Vanessa said. Bring a camera and do not tell anyone where you are going. She ended the call and turned back to her vandalized vehicle. The security cameras covering this lot had been conveniently malfunctioning all evening. She had already checked. Whoever was hunting her had just made their first mistake. They had shown her they were afraid. Afraid enough to risk exposure with a direct threat. That fear meant she was closer to the truth than they wanted her to be. The skills assessment began at 0600 under a gray November sky. Vanessa stood among a dozen officers at the starting line of the combat fitness course, her face betraying nothing of the calculations running through her mind. She could dominate this course. Every obstacle, every station, every timed event had been part of her training in another life. Her body remembered movements that most soldiers never learned existed, but revealing that capability would raise questions she could not answer. So she held back. The weapons qualification came first. Vanessa shot well enough to pass, but not well enough to stand out. Her groupings were tight, but not remarkable. Her times were solid, but not exceptional. She watched Whitford's allies post superior scores and saw the satisfaction on the colonel's face. The tactical decision stations followed, scenarios designed to test judgment under pressure. Vanessa answered correctly but slowly, deliberately introducing hesitation that felt like swallowing glass. Each mediocre performance was a small betrayal of everything she had earned in places no one would ever know about. By the afternoon, she had completed every event with passing marks and nothing more. Whitford stood among the observers, his expression a mixture of vindication and contempt. "Colonel Yellerin meets the minimum standards," he announced to the assembled officers. Adequate performance for an officer of her background. The words were designed to wound. They did. Vanessa returned to her office, expecting the day's humiliations to be over. She was wrong. A JAG officer was waiting outside her door, a manila folder tucked under his arm. His face held the careful neutrality of someone delivering news they knew would devastate. "Colonel Yellerin," he said, "I am Captain Morrison from the Judge Advocate General's office. I need to speak with you regarding a formal complaint that has been filed against you." Vanessa's stomach tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "What kind of complaint?" Morrison glanced down the hallway, then lowered his voice. "Falsification of official records. Specifically, allegations that you have claimed membership in a military unit that does not exist in order to inflate your credentials and qualify for positions beyond your actual experience level." The world seemed to narrow around her. "Who filed this complaint?" "I am not at liberty to disclose that information at this time." Morrison opened the folder and handed her a document. "You are being summoned to appear before a preliminary inquiry board in 72 hours. I strongly recommend you retain legal counsel." Vanessa took the document without reading it. Her eyes were fixed on Morrison's face. "These allegations are false." The JAG officer's expression did not change. "Then you will have the opportunity to demonstrate that before the board." He paused. "Colonel, I should tell you that the complaint includes supporting documentation. Records that appear to show significant discrepancies between your official service history and claims you have allegedly made regarding classified assignments." He left her standing in the hallway with the document in her hands and the ground crumbling beneath her feet. General Harrington's office felt smaller than usual when Vanessa arrived. The general sat behind his desk, his face drawn with an exhaustion that went beyond physical fatigue. "I cannot help you," Harrington said before she could speak. The words fell between them like stones. "Officially, Black Talon does not exist. I cannot verify your service without exposing the entire program. Every operation, every operator, every family that believes their loved one died in a training accident." Vanessa remained standing. "So I'm supposed to let them destroy my career based on lies while the truth stays buried?" Harrington leaned forward, his voice heavy. "I wish there was another way. I have spent the last 3 hours trying to find one. But the moment I confirm anything about that program, it stops being classified and starts being evidence. Evidence that could be subpoenaed, leaked, or twisted into something unrecognizable. And the people who are doing this know that," Vanessa said quietly. "They are counting on it." "Yes." Harrington met her eyes. "They are counting on the fact that your greatest protection is also your greatest vulnerability. The same secrecy that kept you safe for years is now the weapon being used against you." Vanessa said nothing. There was nothing to say. Her quarters felt emptier than usual that night. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the phone in her hands. The number she dialed was one she knew by heart, one that connected her to a small apartment in Washington where her mother had lived alone since her father's death. The voice that answered was warm despite the late hour. "Vanessa, sweetheart, is everything all right?" Vanessa closed her eyes. She could not explain what was happening, could not burden her mother with fears she did not have words for. "I just wanted to hear your voice, Mama." They talked for 20 minutes about nothing important. Her mother's book club, the neighbor's new dog, a recipe she was trying to perfect, normal things, safe things, the kind of conversation that existed in a world where daughters did not carry secrets that could destroy them. When she finally hung up, Vanessa allowed herself to cry. Just for a moment. Just long enough to remember that she was still human beneath the armor she wore. A knock at her door interrupted the silence. She wiped her face and opened it to find Command Sergeant Major Vickers standing in the hallway with 2 cups of coffee and an expression that expected nothing. "Heard about the JAG summons," he said simply. "Figured you might want some company." Vanessa stepped aside to let him in. They sat in silence for a long time, drinking coffee that neither of them tasted. Vickers did not ask questions. He did not offer platitudes or promises. He simply sat with her in the darkness and refused to let her be alone. Sometimes Vanessa thought that was enough. The call from her attorney came at 0700 the next morning. His voice was tight with controlled alarm. "Colonel, we have a problem. The documentation included with the complaint against you, the records that supposedly prove you falsified your service history. I have been reviewing them overnight. And they're forgeries. Good ones, but forgeries nonetheless. Someone has accessed your classified personnel files and altered them. They have created a paper trail that makes your actual assignments look like manufactured fiction. Dates have been changed. Unit designations have been modified. Authorization signatures have been replaced with versions that do not match any records on file." Vanessa gripped the phone tighter. "What does that mean for my case?" "It means that whoever is behind this did not just file a complaint. They created evidence to support it. Evidence that will look damning to anyone who does not know what your real records are supposed to contain." He paused. "And Colonel, there is something else. The alterations were made using access credentials that trace back to a contractor account. A contractor with connections to the highest levels of the defense industry." Vanessa stared out her window at the morning sun rising over Fort Bragg. The trap had been set with precision she had to admire, even as it closed around her. Someone had not just tried to end her career. They had tried to erase her entirely. And she had 72 hours to prove she had ever existed at all. The secure terminal in Vanessa's quarters glowed in the pre-dawn darkness. She had not slept. Instead, she had spent the night reaching out through channels that officially did not exist, calling in favors from people who would deny ever knowing her. The breakthrough came at 0430. A former intelligence analyst, now working in the private sector, had traced the contractor account used to access her files. The digital trail was deliberately obscured, routed through multiple shell companies and offshore servers. But every trail led somewhere if you followed it long enough. This one led to Whitford Industries. Vanessa stared at the information on her screen, pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. The defense contractor run by Colonel Whitford's uncle. The company that had lost a $300 million equipment contract 4 years ago. The same contract that had been terminated after a classified operation exposed catastrophic failures in their tactical communication systems. An operation codenamed Black Talon. She remembered that mission with perfect clarity. A village in northern Iraq, a hostage rescue that should have been straightforward. But the communications equipment had failed at the critical moment. Encrypted channels collapsed. Coordination between teams became impossible. 3 operators died in the chaos that followed. Rodriguez, Chun, and Becky. The official investigation had blamed enemy interference. But Vanessa had seen the equipment logs. The failure was not external. It was a fundamental design flaw that Whitford Industries had concealed to meet contract deadlines. Their negligence had killed her teammates. And now their family was trying to bury the only witness who could prove it. General Harrington was already in his office when Vanessa arrived, despite the early hour. His face tightened when he saw the folder in her hands. "What have you found?" he asked, though something in his tone suggested he already suspected. Vanessa laid the documents on his desk. "The contractor account that accessed my files is linked to Whitford Industries through 3 layers of shell companies. Colonel Whitford's uncle, Harrison Whitford Jr., is the majority shareholder. She paused, letting the connection settle. This is not about my promotion, sir. This is not about the training program. This is about what happened in Iraq 4 years ago. Harrington picked up the documents, scanning them with eyes that grew darker with each page. You are saying the Whitford family is targeting you because of Black Talon. I am saying they lost a contract worth hundreds of millions of dollars because our operation exposed the truth about their equipment. 3 of my teammates died because of failures they covered up. Vanessa's voice hardened. They're not just trying to end my career. They're trying to discredit me before I can ever testify about what really happened. The general set down the papers and walked to his window. The morning sun was beginning to paint the sky in shades of orange and gold, but there was no warmth in his expression. If what you're saying is true, this goes beyond anything I can address through normal channels. We're talking about conspiracy, obstruction of justice, potentially criminal negligence resulting in the deaths of American service members. I know. Vanessa stepped closer. That is why I'm bringing it to you. You are the only person at this installation with the clearance to understand what is at stake. Harrington turned to face her. The weight of decades of service showed in every line of his face. You understand that pursuing this will not just expose the Whitfords. It will expose Black Talon. Every operation, every target, every method we used. The families who believe their children died in training accidents will learn the truth. Some truths need to come out, Vanessa said quietly. Rodriguez, Chun, and Becky deserve better than a lie on their headstones. Their families deserve to know they died as heroes, not statistics. The general studied her for a long moment. Then he reached for his secure phone and dialed a number from memory. Vanessa watched as he spoke in low tones to someone on the other end, his words too quiet for her to hear clearly. The conversation lasted less than 3 minutes. When he hung up, his expression had shifted. Something that might have been hope flickered behind his eyes. I need you to sit down, he said. What I am about to tell you does not leave this room. Vanessa took the chair across from his desk, her heart beating faster. Harrington leaned forward. The Pentagon has been investigating Whitford Industries for almost 2 years. Contract fraud, bribery of procurement officials, falsification of testing data. They have suspected the family of systemic corruption across multiple defense programs, but they have never been able to build a case that would stick. Vanessa felt the ground shifting beneath her. They have been waiting for the Whitfords to make a move. Exactly. Harrington nodded slowly. The investigators knew that eventually the family would overreach. They would target someone who could fight back. Someone who had evidence they could not suppress. He paused. They have been watching Marcus Whitford since he arrived at Fort Bragg. They suspected he was placed here deliberately, though they could not prove it. And now you have given them exactly what they needed. Harrington's voice carried a weight that made Vanessa's breath catch. The attack on your records, the forged documents, the contractor account trail. It is all evidence of obstruction and conspiracy. Evidence that connects directly to the family. Vanessa processed the implications. I'm not just a target. I am bait. You were never supposed to be, Harrington said. But when you invoked Black Talon in that conference room, you put yourself at the center of something much larger than your career. The Pentagon investigators have been waiting for the Whitfords to expose themselves. Your case is now the centerpiece of their investigation. The revelation settled over Vanessa like a wave. For days, she had felt like a woman drowning, fighting against currents she could not see. Now she understood that those currents had been pulling her towards something larger than herself. What happens now, she asked. Harrington picked up his phone again. Now I'll make another call. There are people in Washington who need to know that their investigation just found its key witness. He met her eyes. And you need to prepare yourself, Vanessa. The next 72 hours are going to determine more than your career. They are going to determine whether a family that has been poisoning the military-industrial complex for decades finally faces justice. Vanessa stood, feeling something she had not felt since the JAG complaint landed on her desk. Purpose. Clear, unwavering purpose. I have been preparing for this my whole life, she said. I just did not know it until now. Harrington nodded. One more thing. The person I spoke with, the lead investigator on the Whitford case, she is flying in tonight. She has been waiting 2 years for a break like this. He paused. She also said something else. Something that made me think you might already know her. Vanessa frowned. Who is she? Harrington's expression was unreadable. She said to tell you that Mosul was not your fault. That the equipment failure was not something anyone could have predicted or prevented. He watched her reaction carefully. She said you would understand what that means. For the first time in years, Vanessa felt tears threatening that had nothing to do with grief. Someone at the Pentagon knew the truth. Someone had been carrying the same burden she had carried alone for so long. She understood exactly what it meant. It meant she was no longer fighting alone. The Pentagon investigator arrived at Fort Bragg under cover of darkness. Her name was Colonel Diana Reeves, and she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had spent 20 years dismantling corruption in places most Americans would never know existed. They met in a secure facility on the far edge of the installation, a building that appeared on no official maps. Harrington made the introductions and then left them alone. Reeves studied Vanessa with eyes that missed nothing. I have been reading your file for 2 years, she said. The real one, not the version Whitford Industries tried to create. You have no idea how long I have waited to meet you. Vanessa remained guarded. The general said you knew about Mosul. I know everything about Mosul. Reeves leaned forward. I was the one who ordered the forensic analysis of the communications equipment after the operation. I saw the design flaws that Whitford Industries buried. I watched them blame enemy interference for failures that were entirely their own making. Then why did nothing happen? 3 of my people died. Because the evidence was classified at levels that made prosecution impossible. Reeves's voice carried old frustration. Every document, every equipment log, every witness statement was sealed under national security protocols. The Whitfords knew that when they accepted the contract. They designed their corruption to hide behind the same walls that protected legitimate secrets. Vanessa absorbed the information. And now they have overreached. The attack on your records was conducted through civilian contractor channels. The forged documents, the unauthorized access, the intimidation campaign, all of it happened outside the classified bubble. Reeves allowed herself a small smile. For the first time in 4 years, we have evidence we can actually use. The briefing lasted 2 hours. Reeves laid out the full scope of the investigation. Whitford Industries have been systematically defrauding the government for over a decade. Defective equipment, falsified test results, bribes to procurement officials. The family had built an empire on the graves of soldiers who trusted the gear they were issued. When it was over, Vanessa felt something she had not expected. Clarity. The weight she had carried since Mosul had not lifted, but it had transformed. It was no longer just grief. It was purpose. Captain Amara Okonkwo was waiting outside Vanessa's office the next morning. Her face held a determination that Vanessa recognized from her own reflection. I need to ask you something, Amara said without preamble, and I need you to tell me the truth. Vanessa gestured her inside and closed the door. Ask. Amara stood rigid, her hands clasped behind her back. The things they are saying about you. The falsified records, the unit that does not exist. Is any of it true? The silence between them stretched thin. Vanessa chose her words carefully. The unit exists. I served in it. The records proving that service are classified at levels I cannot discuss. She met Amara's eyes. Everything they're accusing me of is a lie designed to destroy me before I can expose something much worse. Amara studied her for a long moment. Then her posture softened. I believe you. I do not know why, and I cannot explain it logically, but I believe you. Why? Because I have watched you for 6 months. I have seen how you treat the soldiers under your command. I have seen how you respond to pressure and injustice and petty cruelty. Amara's voice strengthened. Good liars do not act like you act. They do not help struggling privates in parking lots when no one is watching. They do not mentor junior officers who have nothing to offer them. Vanessa felt something loosen in her chest. The isolation she had carried for so long cracked, just slightly. Thank you, Captain. That means more than you know. Amara nodded. Whatever you need from me, whatever comes next, I am with you. That evening, Vanessa found Delacroix at the post cemetery again. They stood together before the unmarked graves, the setting sun painting the stones in shades of amber and gold. "Do you ever think about what we could have done differently?" Delacroix asked. His voice was barely above a whisper. Vanessa closed her eyes, and for a moment she was back in that village in northern Iraq. The memory came in fragments. The crackle of failed communications. Rodriguez's voice cutting through static, calling for support that could not hear him. The sound of gunfire from a direction they had not anticipated. Chun going down first, then Becky, then Rodriguez tried to drag them both to cover with bullets, tearing the air around him. She remembered reaching them too late. Remembered the weight of Rodriguez's body as she pulled him behind a crumbling wall. Remembered his eyes finding hers in the darkness, the words he tried to speak with his last breath. "Not your fault," he had said. "Tell them. Not your fault." She had never told anyone. Until now. Rodriguez's last words were about us, she said quietly. He did not want us to carry the blame for something we could not control. Delacroix was silent for a long moment. Then he reached out and placed his hand on one of the unmarked stones. "I talked to Colonel Reeves this afternoon. She told me what the investigation found. The equipment failures. The cover-up." Vanessa nodded. They died because someone decided profit mattered more than their lives. And now we make sure it mattered. Vanessa turned to face him. Their sacrifice, their family's pain, all of it. We make sure it leads to something. Delacroix met her eyes. "Then I am with you. Whatever it takes." Command Sergeant Major Vickers found her in the NCO club later that night. He slid into the seat across from her with the easy familiarity of someone who had long since stopped caring about the boundaries between ranks. "Word is you have been busy," he said. "Visitors from Washington. Meetings in buildings that do not exist. People are starting to talk. Let them talk." Vanessa took a sip of water. "By this time next week, they will have plenty to talk about." Vickers studied her with eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. "You know, Colonel, in 32 years of service, I have met maybe 5 officers I would follow into hell without asking questions." He paused. "You're one of them. Why?" "Because you carry something most officers never learn to carry. Sacrifice. Real sacrifice. Not the kind they teach at war colleges." He leaned back. "I do not know what you did in that unit that does not exist. I do not need to know. But whatever it costs you, you are still standing. Still fighting. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are." Vanessa felt the words settle into her like warmth after a long winter. "Thank you, Sergeant Major. For everything." Vickers nodded and rose to leave. Then he paused. "One more thing. Colonel Whitford held a press conference with the Post Public Affairs Office this afternoon. Announced he is formally requesting an Inspector General investigation into the training program and everyone associated with it." Vanessa's blood ran cold. An IG investigation means subpoena power. It means they can compel testimony. Demand documents. Vickers's face was grim. If they get that investigation approved, there will be no more hiding behind classification. Everything comes out one way or another. He left her sitting alone with the weight of what was coming. The walls were closing in. Whitford had just raised the stakes to a level where secrets could no longer be kept. Either Vanessa exposed the truth on her own terms, or it would be ripped from her by force. She had 48 hours to decide which it would be. The offer arrived through official channels at 0800. A representative from the Army's Office of Personnel Management sat across from Vanessa in a sterile conference room, a folder of documents spread between them. "The terms are generous," the representative said. His voice carried the practiced neutrality of someone who delivered these offers regularly. "Full retirement at your current grade. All benefits preserved. A commendation letter that speaks to your years of dedicated service without referencing any of the current proceedings." Vanessa studied the documents without touching them. "And in exchange, you sign a non-disclosure agreement covering all aspects of your service history. You withdraw any complaints or allegations you have made against other officers. You leave Fort Bragg within 30 days and never discuss the circumstances of your departure with anyone." The representative leaned forward slightly. "Colonel, I want to be clear about something. This offer comes from people who want to see this situation resolved quietly. People with significant influence over how the next few weeks unfold for you. If you decline, those same people will ensure that the alternative is considerably less pleasant. Vanessa met his eyes. Who sent you? The representative's expression did not change. That is not relevant to the terms being offered. It is relevant to my answer. Vanessa stood, leaving the documents untouched. Tell whoever sent you that I am not interested in their generous terms. Tell them that if they want me gone, they will have to remove me the hard way. And tell them that when this is over, I will remember exactly who tried to buy my silence. She walked out before he could respond. Colonel Reeves was waiting in Vanessa's office when she returned. The Pentagon investigator had spent the morning coordinating with her team in Washington, and her face carried the focused intensity of someone preparing for battle. They made you an offer, Reeves said. It was not a question. Vanessa nodded. Retirement with full benefits. All I had to do was disappear and keep my mouth shut. And you refused. Vanessa sat down across from her. I did not survive Mosul to spend the rest of my life hiding from the people who got my teammates killed. She paused. Besides, if I take their offer, who stops them from doing this to someone else? Who fights for the next officer they decide to destroy? Reeves studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled, a rare expression that transformed her stern features. That is exactly what I hope you would say. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Because while you were turning down their bribe, my team was finishing our case file. We have everything we need to bring formal charges against Whitford Industries and everyone connected to the cover-up. Vanessa took the folder and began reviewing its contents. Financial records showing payments from Whitford Industries to the contractor account used to access her files. Communication logs proving coordination between Marcus Whitford and his uncle's company. Testimony from former employees describing the systematic falsification of equipment test results. This is enough to end them, Vanessa said quietly. It is enough to start, Reeves corrected. The legal process will take years. But yes, this is the foundation we have been building for 2 years. Your case gave us the final pieces we needed. A knock at the door interrupted them. Captain Amara Okonkwo entered, her arms full of files and her face flushed with urgency. I have something, she said. Something important. Vanessa gestured for her to continue. Amara spread the files across the desk. For the past 6 months, I have been documenting every interaction with Colonel Whitford and his staff. Every delayed approval, every blocked initiative, every meeting where I was dismissed or condescended to. She looked up at Vanessa. You told me to build my case. I did. Reeves picked up one of the files, scanning its contents with growing interest. These are dated and detailed. Specific quotes, witness names, patterns of behavior. There's more. Amara pulled out a separate folder. Last month, Major Hendricks approached me after a staff meeting. He was drunk, and he said things I do not think he meant to say. Things about how Colonel Whitford's family had promised him a position at their company after he retired. Things about how they had done the same for other officers who helped them in the past. Reeves looked at Vanessa, her expression sharp with recognition. Bribery of military officials. That is a federal crime. I recorded the conversation, Amara said quietly. I know it might not be admissible, but I have it. The room fell silent as the implications settled over them. Amara had just handed them a weapon they had not expected. Evidence of corruption that extended beyond document manipulation into active criminal conspiracy. Vanessa felt something shift in her chest. Pride in the young officer who had taken her advice and turned it into ammunition. Gratitude for allies who had chosen to stand with her when standing alone would have been so much easier. This changes things, Reeves said. She was already reaching for her phone. I need to brief my team. We may need to accelerate our timeline. The calm before the storm lasted exactly 4 hours. Vanessa spent the afternoon in her quarters, reviewing documents and preparing her testimony for whatever came next. The tension that had gripped her for weeks had transformed into something steadier. Focus, purpose, the clarity that came from knowing exactly what she was fighting for. She allowed herself a single moment of peace. Standing at her window as the sun began its descent, watching soldiers move across the installation grounds. Young men and women who had signed up to serve something larger than themselves. People who deserved to trust the equipment they carried and the leaders who commanded them. This was why she fought. Not for herself, for them. The knock at her door shattered the stillness. A JAG officer stood in the hallway, his face grave. "Colonel O'Yelleran, I have been instructed to inform you that Colonel Marcus Whitford has filed formal charges against you with the post commander. The charges include conduct unbecoming an officer, making false official statements, and fraudulent claims regarding military service." Vanessa kept her expression neutral despite the ice forming in her stomach. "When is the hearing?" "You are summoned to appear before a board of inquiry at 0900, 3 days from now." The officer handed her a document. "The board will have full authority to hear evidence, compel testimony, and make recommendations regarding your continued service." After he left, Vanessa stood alone in the silence of her quarters, the summons heavy in her hands. Whitford had made his move. He was betting everything on destroying her before she could destroy him. The next 72 hours would determine which of them was right. She picked up her phone and dialed Reeves. "He filed charges," Vanessa said. "Board of inquiry in 3 days." Reeves's voice was calm. "Then we have 3 days to end this. Are you ready?" Vanessa looked at the photograph in her drawer. Rodriguez, Chun, Becky. 3 faces she would carry with her into that hearing room. "I have been ready for 4 years," she said. "I just did not know it until now." The Board of Inquiry convened at 0900 in the main hearing room of Fort Bragg's headquarters building. Vanessa entered in her dress uniform, her decorations arranged in precise rows across her chest. She had worn this uniform to funerals and promotions, to ceremonies that marked the milestones of a career built in shadows. Today it would either be her armor or her burial shroud. Colonel Marcus Whitford sat at the prosecution table, flanked by 2 JAG officers and a stack of documents that represented months of manufactured evidence. His expression carried the confidence of a man who believed he had already won. The board consisted of 5 senior officers, none of whom Vanessa recognized. They had been brought in from other installations specifically to avoid conflicts of interest. General Harrington sat in the gallery as an observer, his face carefully neutral. "Colonel Whitford," the board president began, "you may present your case." Whitford rose with practiced grace. "Members of the board, I stand before you today with evidence of a troubling pattern of deception by Colonel Vanessa O'Yelleran." He gestured to his documents. "Over the past several months, Colonel O'Yelleran has made claims regarding service in a classified unit that, according to all official records, does not exist." He presented his evidence methodically. The forged documents showing discrepancies in her service record. Testimony from officers who claimed they had never heard of Black Talon. Personnel records that had been altered to make her actual assignments look like fiction. Vanessa listened without interrupting. She had expected this. She had prepared for this. When Whitford finally concluded, the board president turned to her. "Colonel O'Yelleran, you may respond to these charges." Vanessa stood. She did not move to the podium. Instead, she remained at the defense table, her voice carrying clearly across the silent room. "Members of the board, I will not be defending myself against these charges today." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Whitford's confident expression flickered with confusion. Instead, Vanessa continued, "I will be presenting evidence of my own. Evidence that these charges were manufactured as part of a criminal conspiracy to silence a witness to corruption and negligence that cost American soldiers their lives." Whitford shot to his feet. "This is outrageous. She is attempting to deflect from her own misconduct by making wild accusations." The board president held up a hand. "Colonel O'Yelleran, these are serious allegations. Do you have evidence to support them?" Vanessa reached into her briefcase and produced a thick folder. "I have documentation showing that the contractor account used to access and alter my personnel files is linked through 3 shell companies to Whitford Industries, a defense contractor owned by Colonel Whitford's uncle." The room went silent. "I have financial records showing payments from Whitford Industries to individuals involved in the creation of the forged documents presented against me today." Vanessa's voice remained steady, each word landing like a hammer blow. I have testimony from a former Whitford Industries employee describing systematic falsification of equipment test data. Equipment that failed during a classified operation 4 years ago. Equipment whose failure resulted in the deaths of 3 American service members. Whitford's face had gone pale. This is lies. Fabrications designed to distract from her own guilt. The board president looked for Vanessa to Whitford and back again. Colonel O'Yelleran, the matters you are describing appear to involve classified information. How do you intend to substantiate these claims without violating security protocols? Before Vanessa could respond, the hearing room doors opened. Colonel Diana Reeves entered, followed by 2 men in civilian suits who carried the unmistakable bearing of federal law enforcement. Behind them walked a 4-star general whose face Vanessa recognized from Pentagon briefings she was never supposed to have attended. General Morrison, the board president said, rising to his feet. His confusion was evident. We were not expecting you. Morrison moved to the front of the room with the unhurried confidence of someone who outranked everyone present. This hearing is now operating under modified protocols, he announced. I am authorized by the Secretary of the Army to discuss classified matters relevant to these proceedings. He turned to the board. Clear the gallery. What follows is for clear personnel only. The room emptied within minutes. Only the board members, Vanessa, Whitford, and the newly arrived officials remained. Morrison addressed the board directly. The unit Colonel O'Yelleran claims to have served in does exist. It is called Black Talon, and its operations are classified at the highest levels of national security. Colonel O'Yelleran was one of its most decorated operators. Vanessa watched Whitford's face as the words registered. The confidence that had carried him into this room was crumbling. Morrison continued. For years ago, a Black Talon operation in Iraq was compromised by the failure of communications equipment manufactured by Whitford Industries. 3 operators died as a result of design flaws that the company had deliberately concealed. Colonel O'Yelleran survived that mission and has carried knowledge of those failures ever since. The board president leaned forward. Are you saying that the charges against Colonel O'Yelleran were fabricated to prevent her from testifying about this equipment failure? I'm saying exactly that. Morrison gestured to Reeves. Colonel Reeves has been leading a Pentagon investigation into Whitford Industries for nearly 2 years. The attack on Colonel O'Yelleran's service record was the final piece of evidence we needed to establish a pattern of criminal conspiracy. Reeves stepped forward and addressed the board. The documentation Colonel O'Yelleran presented is accurate. We have independently verified every element. The forged records, the contractor connections, the financial transactions. All of it traces back to Whitford Industries and individuals acting on behalf of the Whitford family. She turned to look directly at Marcus Whitford, including Colonel Whitford himself. The silence that followed was absolute. Whitford stood frozen at the prosecution table, his carefully constructed case dissolving around him. He had demanded this investigation. He had pushed for this hearing. And now he was trapped in the very mechanism he had designed to destroy someone else. Colonel Whitford, the board president said slowly, in light of this new information, you are hereby relieved of your position as complainant in these proceedings. You will remain on this installation pending further investigation into your role in the matters described. 2 military police officers entered the room as if on cue. They positioned themselves on either side of Whitford, not touching him, but making their presence unmistakably clear. Whitford looked at Vanessa across the room. For a moment, something human flickered in his eyes. Fear. Confusion. The dawning recognition that everything he had built was falling apart. Vanessa met his gaze without triumph, without satisfaction. She felt only the weight of 4 years finally beginning to lift. You wanted an investigation, she said quietly. Now you have one. The board president turned to Vanessa. Colonel O'Yelleran, in light of the evidence presented today, all charges against you are dismissed pending formal review. He paused. And on behalf of this board, I apologize for the proceedings you have been subjected to. Vanessa nodded once, her expression unchanged. The victory was real, but it was not yet complete. The news spread through Fort Bragg like wildfire. By noon, everyone on the installation knew that Colonel Marcus Whitford had been relieved of his duties pending investigation. By evening, rumors about the reasons had mutated into a dozen different versions, each more dramatic than the last. Only a handful of people knew the truth. Vanessa spent the hours after the hearing in a secure conference room with Colonel Reeves and her team, reviewing the evidence that would form the foundation of the federal case against Whitford Industries. The documentation was overwhelming. Financial records spanning a decade. Testimony from whistleblowers who had been silenced. Equipment failure reports that had been buried. And at the center of it all, 3 names. Rodriguez, Chun, Becky. 3 soldiers whose deaths had finally been given meaning. General Morrison requested Vanessa's presence in his temporary office late that afternoon. When she arrived, she found him standing at the window, watching the sun begin its descent over the training fields. "I have been reading your operational files," Morrison said without turning around. "The complete files, not the sanitized versions." He paused. "You should have received the Distinguished Service Cross for what you did in Mosul. Probably the Medal of Honor." Vanessa remained at attention. "I did not do it for medals, sir." Morrison turned to face her. "No, you did not. That is precisely why you deserve them." He gestured for her to sit. "The board has asked me to oversee the formal review of your case. The charges have been dismissed, but there are administrative matters that need resolution." He paused. "There is also the question of what comes next for you." Vanessa sat down, her posture still rigid. "I have not thought that far ahead, sir." "Then allow me to help you think about it." Morrison leaned forward. "You have been operating in the shadows for most of your career. That career is about to become significantly more visible. The investigation into Whitford Industries will eventually become public. Your role in exposing their corruption will be part of the record." "I understand." "Do you?" Morrison studied her carefully. "You will be asked to testify before congressional committees. You will be interviewed by investigators, lawyers, and probably journalists. The secrecy that protected you for years is about to disappear." Vanessa met his gaze. "The secrecy also protected the people who killed my teammates. I will take visibility over complicity." Something that might have been approval flickered in Morrison's eyes. "Good answer." Colonel Patricia Sung found Vanessa in the headquarters corridor an hour later. The woman who had been Whitford's ally looked diminished somehow, as if the events of the day had stripped away a layer of armor she had worn for years. "Colonel O'Yelleran," Sung said. Her voice was stiff, formal. "May I speak with you privately?" Vanessa led her to an empty office and closed the door. She waited. Sung stood rigid, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere past Vanessa's shoulder. "I owe you an apology. A real one, not the kind that comes with qualifications or excuses." Vanessa said nothing. "I knew something was wrong." Sung's voice cracked slightly. "The way Whitford pursued you, the intensity of his opposition, it went beyond professional disagreement. I told myself he was simply passionate about standards, about tradition. I told myself that supporting him was supporting the institution. And now I understand that I was supporting corruption." Sung finally met Vanessa's eyes. "I was so focused on my own advancement that I ignored every warning sign. I let myself be used as a weapon against someone who was fighting for something real." The silence between them stretched thin. "Why are you telling me this?" Vanessa asked finally. "Because you deserve to hear it, and because I need to say it." Sung straightened her shoulders. "I have already spoken with General Morrison. I am resigning my position on the promotion board. I am requesting reassignment to a post where I can rebuild my integrity from the ground up." Vanessa studied the woman before her. She saw the shame, the regret, the desperate need for some form of absolution. She also saw something else. Courage. The courage it took to admit fault when silence would have been easier. "I accept your apology," Vanessa said quietly. "What you do with it is up to you." Sung nodded once, then turned and left without another word. That evening, General Harrington invited Vanessa to his office for what he called an informal conversation. She found him sitting in one of the leather chairs near the window rather than behind his desk. A bottle of bourbon and 2 glasses sat on the table between the chairs. "I think we have earned this," Harrington said, pouring 2 measures. He handed one to Vanessa and raised his own. To the ones who did not make it home. Vanessa raised her glass. To Rodriguez, Chun, and Becky. They drank in silence. The investigation is expanding, Harrington said after a moment. Whitford Industries is just the beginning. The Pentagon has identified a network of contractors who have been using similar methods to suppress evidence of equipment failures, bribe procurement officials, and silence whistleblowers. He paused. They want you to help dismantle it. Vanessa set down her glass. Me specifically? You specifically. Harrington leaned back in his chair. You have proven that you cannot be bought, intimidated, or silenced. You have operational experience that most investigators will never understand. And you have something else that matters. He met her eyes. You have a reason to see this through. Vanessa thought about the photograph in her drawer. 3 faces crossed out with black marker. 3 lives cut short by greed and negligence. What would that look like? She asked. A special assignment. Direct report to Morrison's office. Access to classified investigations across multiple agencies. Harrington paused. It would mean leaving Fort Bragg, leaving the training program you have been building, starting over in a role that most people will never know exists. Vanessa considered the offer. A few weeks ago, she had been fighting to save her career. Now, she was being asked to become something larger. A weapon pointed at the corruption that had taken so much from her. How long do I have to decide? Morrison wants an answer by the end of the week. Harrington finished his bourbon and set down the glass. But Vanessa, I have known you for a long time. I watched you survive things that would have destroyed most officers. I saw what you did in that hearing room today. He stood and moved to the window, his back to her. You have already decided. You just have not admitted it to yourself yet. Vanessa sat alone in the gathering darkness, the weight of the choice settling over her. Harrington was right. She had already decided. The only question was what it would cost her. The formal announcement came 3 days after the hearing. Colonel Marcus Whitford had been stripped of his command and placed under military arrest pending court-martial. The charges included conspiracy, obstruction of justice, conduct unbecoming an officer, and making false official statements. Additional charges were expected as the investigation continued. Whitford Industries faced a different kind of reckoning. Federal investigators had descended on the company's headquarters with warrants covering a decade of contracts. The company's stock price collapsed within hours of the news becoming public. Harrison Whitford Sr., the retired general who had orchestrated so much of the corruption from his Virginia estate, found himself facing questions from agencies he had once commanded. Vanessa watched the news coverage from her office, feeling strangely detached from the spectacle. She had spent so long fighting in shadows that the bright lights of public exposure felt almost unreal. A knock at her door pulled her back to the present. Captain Amara Okonkwo stood in the doorway, her expression a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. You wanted to see me, ma'am? Vanessa gestured to the chair across from her desk. Sit down, Captain. We need to talk about your future. Amara sat, her posture rigid with uncertainty. If this is about my involvement in the investigation, I want you to know that I do not regret anything. Whatever consequences come from the documentation I provided, I am prepared to accept them. Vanessa allowed herself a small smile. There will be consequences, just not the kind you were expecting. She slid a folder across the desk. I have submitted a recommendation for your assignment to the Army's Strategic Leadership Development Program. It is one of the most competitive programs in the service. Fewer than 30 officers are selected each year. Amara's eyes widened as she opened the folder. Ma'am, I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything. You earned this. Vanessa leaned back in her chair. The documentation you kept, the risks you took, the loyalty you showed when it would have been easier to walk away. Those are the qualities the Army needs in its future leaders. Amara looked up from the papers, her eyes bright. I learned them from you. The words settled between them like a bridge connecting 2 points of a journey. Vanessa remembered being a young officer herself, searching for mentors who understood that leadership meant more than rank and regulations. She had found precious few. Can I ask you something? Amara said. Something personal? Vanessa nodded. The training program you were building, the one that started all of this. Amara hesitated. Will it survive? Will everything you've fought for actually change anything? Vanessa considered the question. I do not know, she admitted. Institutions resist change. The people who benefit from the old ways will always fight to preserve them. But she paused, choosing her words carefully. Every time someone stands up, every time someone refuses to be silenced, it makes it a little easier for the next person. That is the only kind of legacy that matters. Amara nodded slowly, absorbing the words. Then she stood and came to attention. Thank you, Colonel, for everything. Vanessa stood as well. Take care of yourself, Captain. And remember that the people who try to make you feel small usually do it because they're afraid of how big you might become. Recognition flickered in Amara's eyes. She had heard those words before, months ago, from a colonel who had stopped to help a struggling private in a parking lot. The circle was complete. The post cemetery was quiet in the late afternoon light. Vanessa and Delacroix stood before the unmarked graves, the autumn wind carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. I received orders this morning, Delacroix said. Reassignment to a training cadre at Fort Benning, teaching the next generation of operators. Vanessa nodded. That is good work. Important work. It is not what I expected. Delacroix's voice was thoughtful. After everything that happened, I thought I would want to disappear. Go somewhere quiet and forget. But forgetting feels like betrayal. He knelt and placed his hand on one of the unmarked stones. They deserve to be remembered. What they did, what they sacrificed, it should mean something. Vanessa knelt beside him. Then make it mean something. Every soldier you train, every lesson you pass on, every life you help save. That is how we honor them. They remained there as the sun touched the horizon, speaking the names of the fallen aloud for the first time in years. Rodriguez, Chun, Becky, 3 names that had lived only in classified files and private grief, finally given voice in the open air. When they rose to leave, something had shifted. The weight they carried had not disappeared, but it had transformed. Grief had become purpose. Loss had become legacy. Command Sergeant Major Vickers' retirement ceremony took place on a crisp Friday morning, with half the installation gathered to honor 32 years of service. The old Sergeant Major stood at attention while generals and colonels spoke of his dedication, his integrity, his unwavering commitment to the soldiers under his care. When it was his turn to speak, Vickers approached the microphone with the unhurried confidence of a man who had faced far more dangerous moments than public speaking. I have served with a lot of soldiers over the years, he began. His gravelly voice carried across the parade ground. Good ones and bad ones. Brave ones and scared ones. The kind who make the news and the kind who never will. He paused, his eyes scanning the assembled crowd until they found Vanessa standing near the back. Some of the best soldiers I have ever known, nobody will ever know their names. They serve in places that do not exist, doing things that will never be acknowledged. They sacrificed everything, including the recognition they deserve, because they believed in something larger than themselves. His gaze held Vanessa's for a long moment. To those soldiers, wherever they are, I want to say thank you. The rest of us may never know what you did, but some of us know that you did it, and that matters. Vanessa felt tears threatening for the first time since Mosul. She blinked them back and stood a little straighter. After the ceremony, Vickers found her in the crowd. He did not say anything. He simply extended his hand. Vanessa took it, and they stood there for a moment, 2 soldiers who understood each other in ways that words could never capture. Take care of yourself, Colonel, Vickers said finally, and give them hell. Vanessa smiled. Always, Sergeant Major. General Harrington summoned her that evening. His office felt different somehow, lighter, as if the shadows that had haunted it for weeks had finally lifted. The promotion board met this afternoon, Harrington said without preamble. He slid an envelope across his desk. Congratulations, Brigadier General Select O'Yellerin. Vanessa stared at the envelope without touching it. After everything that happened, they still selected me? After everything that happened, they could not justify selecting anyone else. Harrington's voice carried a warmth she had rarely heard. You exposed corruption that had been festering for years. You stood your ground when standing down would have been easier. You showed the entire army what integrity looks like under pressure. Vanessa finally picked up the envelope, feeling the weight of everything it represented. There is more, Harrington continued. The Pentagon has approved your training program. Full funding, full support, complete autonomy to build it the way you envisioned. He paused. They want you to lead it. The circle was complete. The program that had started everything, the proposal that Whitford had tried to destroy, would now bear her name and her vision. What does it begin? Vanessa asked. Whenever you are ready. Harrington stood and extended his hand. Congratulations, General. You earned this. Every bit of it. The promotion ceremony took place on a bright December morning, with the winter sun casting long shadows across the parade ground. Vanessa stood at attention before a crowd of officers, soldiers, and civilians who had gathered to witness her transformation from colonel to brigadier general. Her mother sat in the front row, her silver hair catching the light, her eyes bright with a pride that needed no words. Grace O'Yelleran had traveled from Washington for this moment, and Vanessa felt her presence like an anchor connecting her to everything that mattered. General Morrison administered the oath, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. Vanessa repeated the words she had first spoken as a young lieutenant, words that had guided her through decades of service in places no one would ever know about. When the moment came, her mother stepped forward to pin the single star onto her shoulder. Grace's hands were steady despite her 73 years, and she held Vanessa's gaze as she secured the insignia in place. Your father would be so proud, Grace whispered. And so am I. Vanessa embraced her mother, allowing herself a moment of pure, uncomplicated joy. The crowd applauded, cameras flashed, and somewhere in the back rows, a small group of men and women in civilian clothes watched without drawing attention to themselves. Vanessa spotted them during the applause. Faces she recognized from another life, operators who had served alongside her in shadows that no longer existed. They did not wave or call out. They simply nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement that meant more than any medal or commendation. By the time the official photographs began, they had slipped away. No record would show they had been there. But Vanessa knew, and that was enough. The reception afterward was a blur of handshakes and congratulations. Officers she barely knew praised her courage. Politicians she had never met spoke of her integrity. Through it all, Vanessa maintained the composure that had carried her through far more difficult moments. General Harrington found her near the refreshment table, momentarily alone. How does it feel? He asked. Vanessa considered the question. Strange, she admitted. I spent so many years making sure no one noticed me. Now everyone wants to shake my hand. Harrington chuckled. You will get used to it, or you will not. Either way, you have earned the right to feel however you want about it. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the crowd. I never thank you properly, Vanessa said. For believing me when you had every reason not to. For protecting me when protection cost you something. Harrington shook his head. I did not protect you. I gave you the space to protect yourself. There's a difference. He turned to face her directly. You did this, Vanessa. All of it. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. 3 weeks later, the Integrated Special Operations Training Program held its first official class. Vanessa stood at the back of the training facility, watching as 40 handpicked soldiers began the curriculum she had spent years developing. Captain Amara Okonkwo, now wearing the insignia of her new assignment, led the opening briefing. Her voice was confident, her presence commanding. She had grown into the leader Vanessa had always seen hiding beneath the surface. The program was everything Vanessa had envisioned. Joint training between branches. Realistic scenarios based on actual operations. Instructors who had lived what they taught. A new generation of soldiers learning from the hard-won wisdom of those who had served before them. Delacroix stood beside her, watching the proceedings with an expression of quiet satisfaction. This is what it was all for, he said. Not the promotions or the recognition. This. Vanessa nodded. They would have been proud. Rodriguez, Chun, Becky. knowing their sacrifice led to something that would save lives. Their names no longer felt like weights. They felt like foundations. In a law office in Arlington, Virginia, Marcus Whitford sat across from his attorneys, reviewing documents that would determine the rest of his life. The military tribunal had been scheduled for spring. The federal charges would follow. His father had stopped taking his calls. His uncle's company had filed for bankruptcy protection. The family name that had opened doors for 4 generations now closed them. Whitford stared at the evidence arrayed against him. Financial records, testimony, documentation that traced every corrupt decision back to its source. He had built his case against Vanessa O'Yelleran, believing that his family's power would protect him. He had been wrong. The attorneys droned on about plea options and sentencing guidelines. Whitford barely listened. He was thinking about a conference room at Fort Bragg, about a woman who had looked him in the eye and said 2 words that had ended everything. Black Talon. He had underestimated her. They all had, and now they were paying the price. 6 months after her promotion, Brigadier General Vanessa O'Yelleran attended a joint planning conference at the Pentagon. The meeting room was filled with senior officers from every branch, discussing initiatives that would shape military policy for the next decade. Vanessa listened more than she spoke, offering input only when her expertise was directly relevant. She had never been comfortable with the politics of high command, and she saw no reason to pretend otherwise. During a break in the proceedings, a newly promoted colonel approached her with the confident swagger of someone who believed his West Point ring entitled him to respect. "General O'Yelleran," he said, his tone carrying a subtle edge. "I have heard interesting things about your career path. Quite unusual for someone in your position." He smiled. "I suppose the Army is changing in all sorts of ways these days." The implication was clear. Vanessa had heard versions of it before, from men who could not believe a woman had earned what she carried. Across the room, General Harrington caught her eye. He had witnessed the exchange, and something in his expression asked a silent question. Did she need backup? Should he intervene? Vanessa held his gaze for a moment, then allowed the faintest smile to cross her face. She turned back to the colonel, her expression pleasant and unbothered. "The Army is definitely changing," she agreed. "Some of us are helping it change faster than others." She walked away before he could respond, leaving him standing alone with his assumptions and his ignorance. She did not need to prove anything anymore. The people who mattered knew exactly who she was. The people who did not would learn eventually, or they would not. Either way, Vanessa O'Yelleran had finally found peace with both possibilities. That evening, she called her mother from her hotel room. "How are you feeling?" Grace asked. "Being back in Washington?" Vanessa looked out the window at the city lights stretching toward the horizon. "I feel like myself," she said. "For the first time in a long time, I feel like myself." Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Your father used to say that the hardest battles are the ones we fight inside ourselves. It sounds like you finally won yours." Vanessa smiled. "I think I did, Mama. I think I finally did." If this story moved you, share your thoughts about what resonated most, whether it was a particular character or moment, or tell us about someone you know whose true capabilities remained hidden from the world around them. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones whose names we never learn.